Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, we're going to be talking about addiction, as I am joined by addiction, wellness, and peer coach, Shannon Schlett. Shannon was born inside of a prison. She struggled with addiction of her own, but she has been able to beat it, and now she's helping others with it as well. So we're going to be talking to her about her journey, her story, and all that she's doing to help others. So Shannon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, thank you for having me, Curtis. It's really fun doing these podcasts. I really think that being able to share helps other people to understand that they can make it. They can get out of the trenches.
Most definitely. Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
For sure. So my name is Shannon. I'm from North Dakota originally. Grew up in some small towns, things of that nature. I am the only African American kid in my family, out of a family of white people, obviously. Right now, I specialize in peer coaching. I just got I just got promoted, and I'm the supervisor now. So I really enjoy that, being able to help people better, or help people along their journey. It's really been a privilege and an honor to do that. So a little bit about some of my early years, I suppose we can start. As I shared, I'm from North Dakota. We grew up very poor. I am smack dab in the middle of a family of 7 kids, essentially. My growing up poor, we I don't know who's familiar with the area. We went through what would be the flood of 97 when I was about, I'm kind of getting off par here, excuse me. We'll just start from the beginning. So when I was born in a prison, my mother, she was absconding from some charges she had out in North Dakota. And before me, she had 3 children with my stepdad. And when she had gotten these charges, she had decided she didn't want to, deal with them, and she had ran. So she went out to Oregon, Portland, Oregon, where she essentially hooked up with my biological father. And then she had decided to come back to North Dakota, do her time, figure out what needed to be done in that aspect. And in doing that, she had later learned that she was pregnant, and then gave birth to me on Thanksgiving Day in prison, or the hospital, or wherever that was at that moment. She had to go back and serve her time. And so my stepfather had come up and signed the birth certificate as I was lighter in color and took me home. So my stepfather had thought that I was his. Fast forward to myself being about 20, I think like 20, and I was in jail for something. I don't remember what it was. It was just kind of like a weekend stint. And I ended up, you're in jail, you're doing that little small talk. And there was a woman who was actually in prison with my mother. And she said, I remember when your stepdad was calling up to the prison, Angie, whose baby is this? Angie, whose baby is this? And she lied her ass off, the baby's yours, the baby's yours. And he finally said, Angie, the baby's black. Whose baby is this? And then she had to tell the truth. And so coming up on that, my mom got out of prison, and, they stayed together. They had 3 children prior to me. But then they had another one. They had 2 more after me. And so that would have been 6, in their home at that time. We had the flood of 97 hit, and that engulfed all of the greater Grand Forks area where I'm from. And so we were, pushed off into different areas of Minnesota. And that was hard for my family. We lost a lot of our things. I don't have any, like baby pictures or anything like that. That was really hard. My mother always struggled with addiction and I think my stepfather did as well, but it was either drinking. I remember having a lot of people who would call them our aunties and our uncles, and they weren't. They were using friends, looking at it from an adult perspective, you can kind of see that. My mother, she liked nice things but could never afford them. And so she would teach all of us kids how to steal. And so starting from the age, I want to say after the flood, things kind of really got worse for us, or maybe I just started to understand better because I was getting older. And so she would take us out to, a TJ Maxx or a Walmart, and she taught us how to take the security tags off of things. She taught us how uh, to look for the eyes in the skies, which would be like the cameras and things of that nature, and to be careful. And so what she would do is she'd have us, she'd know what she wanted. She loaded stuff up. We'd put stuff in totes in the Walmart, put the lid on it, and then teach us how to, like walk out. And she'd have us walk out with it because we were minors. So if we got in trouble, it was a slap on the wrist. These kids don't know what they're doing, such and such, whatever. So we did that a lot of our younger years. Um, my older sisters probably did more of it. Um, I remember times where we got caught and it worked that way. They just kind of let us go, whatever. I remember my mom sending my sisters up to like dope houses to go get money for her, or not money for her, but and that day was crank. Crank was kind of her thing. Um, I remember big moments where she would, blame the kids for taking money out of her purse. But it was my stepdad at the time because he needed money for lunch for work or something of that nature. And she'd destroy the house, just mad, just pissed. And later to find, that my stepdad needed lunch money or money for gas or whatever it was to get to work. And then it would just be all of a sudden she'd be settled. I don't want to say that we weren't locked up in a closet. We weren't beat to death, but there are times where my mom would be coming down and I remember my sister being sick one day and she wanted to stay home because she was sick. And my mom got so mad. She said, "You're going to get on that bus." And she beat the shit out of her for no reason. Just, I remember my sister saying, "Mom, I'm sick." And she pushed her into the closet and just backhanded and legit closed fist punched her. And made her get on the bus with a bloody lip. And uh, and then there were moments where things were really good. We'd go out to the lake and as a family, and my dad had a friend who had a boat, and we would kneeboard or do things like that. So it's really hard when not everything was bad. But most of the memories that come to mind weren't the best. We lived in houses that were like pretty much abandoned farmsteads. And my stepdad was a handyman. So my mother would like convince him, "Hey, let's fix this house up." And, you can't fix a house up without the proper funds. And, life's hard when you have 6 kids at that time and trying to build things up. So we had houses that legit had, water. Well, the house that comes to mind the most for me is we had a house that had black mold in the basement and continuing flooding in the basement. So it always had stagnant water in the basement. We had no insulation. We had a wood burning stove. Uh, my parents didn't pay their electricity bill, so we ran it off a generator. Um, there were days where the generator would run out of gas, and we would just, throw in some candles or use the stove for heat. Some of the houses didn't have insulation and no drywall. We had, like I said, that wood burning stove. I remember boiling my bath water at times, and you would start from the cleanest kid and go to the dirtiest one. Um, it wasn't the best. And when you grow up poor like that, and you're going to school where it's rich farming towns, right? So the kids that you're surrounded with, they have everything and anything they could imagine. They didn't have to worry about things of that nature. Um, And so growing up in that way, it wasn't the easiest. It was hard. And especially being the only one who was black. We don't talk about enough about how like representation does matter. I was always looking to find myself in someone else. And I'm surrounded by what the idea of beauty is in these smaller towns, living in North Dakota, there's not very many people that look like me. And in a family where I'm always mistaken as the little friend or Um, it's so it's funny. There's the things that people say to interject. Oh, it's so nice for you to bring your little friend shopping. Meanwhile, we're undercover robbing this store. So it's funny the way things get interpreted. Kind of like, fast forwarding a bit. Clearly, my mother was still struggling with addiction. My stepfather, he drank. I don't want to say that he struggled. I think that he could. You know, there's different ways that my mother has explained it. And that the way that view it is they possibly did use together. And I don't think that my stepfather got addicted the way that she did. And that was definitely her underlying issues. And I think my mother has more mental health things that she's never identified with. So she struggled a lot of my years. And she wanted to run away with us kids out to Florida. And so she loaded up her car. And I remember leaving kind of in the still of the night, loading up her station wagon. And she had my sister do, she had my sister go into my mom was bartending at this VFW at the time. And my understanding is she had my sisters rob the safe and she had that money to help us get down to Florida. And she she loaded us up in the still of the night. My stepdad came out the house, and I remember him punching the window of the car. And my mom just kind of, putzed off into the night. And then we took the little trip down to Florida. And my mother, not being the most aware person of finances, we made it to Florida, but we were broke when we got to Florida. Sleeping in the car. I remember this lady out of a gas station coming over and bringing some cookies. And I don't know if it was, I just remember the cookies part because I think she felt bad for us. My mom was like scrambling for some gas money and she was yelling at me, like, look in my purse. I know there's got to be something in there. And it was just pennies. It was just pennies. Um, I don't know how she got the money to, to get gas that day, but she did. So we went and we were sleeping on the beaches in Clearwater for a little while, for about, I think a couple days. And then I don't know if she phoned back home or what, but she got some money and she decided that we needed to leave Florida and head back home to North Dakota. And when we got to South Dakota, she was having us, like, this is where I live now. I live here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. She had us go to the mall in South Dakota, and we were walking around. I think it was J.C. Penney's or Macy's, one of those. And she had us doing a little gig, loading up a cart, and we knew my sisters knew that someone was following us around. Like they had a bad feeling, and so my sister, uh, the sister right above me, she said, "No, I don't want to do it." And I was still pretty young to be, putzing out a cart that size. So it was up to my other sister to do it, and she was, yeah. You never talk about this, but parents do have favorites, and I think my oldest sister kind of got the brunt of things at times. And so my mother, with her manipulation, it would always be like, "Oh, you don't want nice things. You don't want to, have these clothes. You don't want to get home. It was always something to kind of like turn it on us. If you don't do this, this is what's not going to happen, or this is what will happen." And so we all left the store, and my oldest sister, carted the cart out, and all you see is security guards following her, and the cart flip, and then she runs right to the car where we're at, and we're surrounded by security officers. So we got put in the children's home here in South Dakota in Sioux Falls. I think it's the children's inn is what we were in at that time. And and my mother got caught up in her gigs and she had to, pay for what she did. So they took her in and she went to jail. She ended up doing some prison time down here in South Dakota. Um, and eventually our stepdad had to come get us. And so he I think he was seeing another woman at that time while my mother was, running away with us to Florida. So he got a car or a van and came down and got all of us kids and we went back home and he I think was lost in himself. My stepdad, he didn't quite know how to take on, six kids by himself. And so he was still out seeing his uh the person he was seeing who became our stepmom later on. And we would be processing your mother leaving, processing some of the things that we've been through, and not having someone explain anything to us, or at least to me. I can't speak for everybody, but at least, sit down and explain things to me so I can understand. Um, our mom's gone, our stepdad's, who I call dad, is out with another woman, and we're at home and we don't have, you know, I think the most we ever really had to eat half the time was ramen or something easy. And if that wasn't the case, like sometimes we would be going down to the local grocery store and charging things under my mother's name, because it was small town, so there was rapport in that sense. But then eventually, then that charge account don't get paid, you don't get no more groceries. So I remember the police officer knocking at the door. Hey, why aren't you guys in school? Because my stepdad didn't quite know how to go about doing that, or didn't have time for it with work or whatever that case may be. I can't speak for him. And so eventually we got reported to social services, and my older sisters went to a safe house. My oldest brother at that time, he was 18 finally. And so he got to go live with our grandparents. And our grandparents, they weren't super involved. They definitely favored my oldest brother. He was able to go out and help my grandpa like work on cars and trucks. The men in our family, they're all mechanic, very, very mechanically inclined. Uh, and so with my brother being that man, he definitely was favored. And so he got to go live with our grandparents. Oldest sisters went to safe houses, and then my younger sister and we went to a foster home. We were there for, I'd say, like about 7 to 8 months. Our stepdad, did what he had to do. Uh, the thing that really, really hurt the most is that when you would have your little visits, I remember him being so angry because he had to pay child support, and he made sure that we knew that. And it was like that was not necessary in my eyes. I remember him saying something along the lines of, they're taking you guys to go buy these nice things, and they expect me to be able to be able to get everything done that I'm supposed to get done, but they don't know that comes out of my check or something like that. But mind you, like these, we didn't have a lot. I remember hand washing clothes. I remember, and this is all I was at this time. Well, by this time I was 10, but from, you know, the year of eight, 8 years old, 9 years old, I was hand washing clothes. I could do laundry, cook, do all those things by then. And uh, it was hard. It was hard. It was really hard. And when he finally got us back, it was, like I said, 7 to 8 months. Uh, we found out that our stepmother was pregnant. And so they had another baby on the way. Um,
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
Something I kind of want to emphasize on is, I don't think badly of my parents. I think that they worked best with what they had. And I think that, everyone has their own stuff that they have to work through. And the area I lived in and the background we came from, I don't think anybody really was aware of mental health or cared to dive into it much. And I wish that that would have been more common. And so, we go home and we live where we live. And I think kind of coming back to myself, a lot of that, I was looking for that outer validation for a lot of years. My older sisters, they, would go out and do whatever. So they dropped out eventually and went and lived their lives individually. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna be the first graduate. This is something to be proud of. Um, so I did volleyball, I did basketball, I did theater, I did musicals, I did FBLA, I did everything under the sun to just say, look at me, I can do this, look at me, and I really searched for that outer validation. And it never came the way that it came from my older sisters. And so this is, my stepfather, my stepmother at the time. And I'm not, I wasn't locked up in a closet. I wasn't neglected in that sense. Um, but I was always searching for someone to say, hey, I'm proud of you. And I don't think I ever got it the way I would have liked or the way that I searched for it. I'm not quite sure. So eventually you get tired. You get tired of doing all these things because you realize as you become an adult, it didn't matter if you did volleyball and basketball. It didn't matter if you did theater. I mean, eventually we're just out here to find a purpose and pay these bills. And uh, eventually, I started working at the age of like 14 or 15. First job was like Little Melby's Food Pride. And it was the first time I was offered meth. And I was kind of, I think I was cool. And some of the older kids that I worked with, they were seniors at the time. And I remember them offering me some meth to go do a line off the back of the toilet. And I said, no, I think I'm good on that. But, it definitely crossed my mind. I didn't use it. But they would, invite me out to parties. So I'd go out, we would smoke weed together, we would drink together. It was cool to feel accepted, to feel good with that group. Um, sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night, things of that nature. Eventually, I ended up saving up money. I got myself a little car, got my license, things of that nature. Got that little taste of freedom. So I'm out at different parties, living my life, this and that. Um, Eventually, I stopped going to school, started working more, things of that nature. And I had a friend who had said, hey, let's go out to Bismarck. I got friends out there. And I got friends out there too. My oldest sister at that time, because I'm about 15 now. My oldest sister at that time, she was living out there. And she still does. And so I said, yeah, I got friends out there too. So we went out there, took my car out there, and it was only supposed to be, a weekend trip. But then my car broke down because we did something stupid, and snowstorm hit. And so I ended up just running away. I just called it good and ran away. And eventually my oldest sister heard that I was in the Bismarck area. She called in a welfare check on me, ended up getting the house I was at, got raided and swatted. So long story short, ended up having to go live with her. And at that time I had started using, I got offered cocaine. That was kind of like the first thing right there, the cocaine, the drinking. And it didn't really grab me the way that that I wanted. Um, I was also, dealt with suicidal ideation, that feeling of not belonging. So before I even ran away, I was cutting around my ankles. I was cutting on my wrist a bit. Never to commit suicide, never to kill myself, but because it felt good. And I remember like my stepdad saying, oh, what happened to your arm? And I said, oh, nothing. I fell off my skateboard. Something silly like that. And, skateboard scratches don't look like that. And no one ever took it serious. So maybe it was another thing to say, look at me. Maybe it was another thing for validation. I'm not quite sure what my thought process was then, but what I do know is I was hurting. And so eventually I remember being at a party and I got offered a hydro. I don't remember if it was green or if it was a blue, but it was a hydro. Crushed it up, snorted it, and I remember that feeling of just numbness. And it was amazing. That was it right there for me. That was good. So, you end up making good friends with the people who offered it to you, and you end up finding out where to get them. So I ended up being, a little bit of just using pills. So opioids became my thing at that time. I was using perks, hydros, things of that nature, just snorting at that time and drinking with friends, things of that. It was just kind of like that little, what would you call it, like a party favor, I guess. Eventually my sister got sick of me because I wasn't listening. And so she told me to go back to my dad's house, my stepdad's. So I got sent back to North Dakota because I was only 17 at that time. Or I got sent back to Grand Forks, so I was 17 at that time. And um, I turned 18 like a month or two later. And so I was working at the Golden Corral, and I was still struggling with, myself, my identity, suicidal ideations, things of that nature. And I met this girl, and I'm lesbian, and I've known that I liked women, or I've known that I loved women since the age of 5, like the earliest I can remember really thinking about that. I remember when the movie Titanic came out and seeing Jack paint Rose. I was, there's probably a reason that's my favorite movie. It was kind of like, I was more excited about Rose than Jack, and my sisters were all digging on Leonardo. So, um, when I met this girl at Golden Corral, you start talking, and she says she's bisexual. She asked what I do in my free time, things of that nature. And this was the first person I had kind of like heard openly admit that they were into girls as well. And so she had said, hey, do anything else? And I was like, oh, I smoke weed, I like hydros, things of that nature. She's like, oh, so y'all like to do meth? And I said, huh, okay. That's the thing that everyone says, don't do it. Whatever you do, don't touch the meth. So you start small talking, start hanging out. And I thought, man, I really dig this girl. And if she's doing meth, it can't be that bad. It really can't. So start doing meth with her and start smoking it. Eventually, we would like quit our job and go back to our job and quit our job and go back to our job. And at some point, we quit, and we were living in like the basement of her mom's house, and we didn't always have money to go get what we wanted. So we ended up like going to grocery stores and like stealing Coracetins and Robitussin and Zicams because there was a robo trip. It was supposed to be such a good time. So we were doing a little bit of robo tripping. Honestly, a lot of my usage was whatever we could get our hands on. And when I started using that, she really fell into that pretty deep. And her mom noticed it pretty quickly and sent her out to rehab. And so here I am. I wasn't kicked out, but it didn't feel good to be there still. So I left, and I was living out of my car, living on the streets, working here and there. I'd be like that couch surfer at parties. You would be the person that would bring all the good stuff to parties, and so then you were welcome to stay. And eventually, I ended up finding a really good connection for morphine. And it was a person who had a prescription for it. So I'd buy the prescription super cheap and sell it. Then a buddy showed me how to suck the coating off and melt it down and shoot it up. And I remember him shooting me up for my first time. And that, for anybody who's ever, there's a way that you feel when you snort, and there's a way that you feel when you pop something. But when you shoot it up, it takes it all away. Anything and everything that you've ever felt, that you've ever had trouble with, anything that you've ever suffered from, any ailment, it takes it all away. And that did it for me. That helped me really put all my problems to the side. So then I began shooting up. I'd shoot up morphine at night, and then I would shoot up meth in the morning to go to work. I started working at a restaurant again. And so I was a closet user. If you weren't shooting up with me, you didn't know that I shot up. So there was probably like 2 or 3 people who knew. Ended up, going to different parties, hanging out with different people. I was dating somebody kind of at that time when I started dabbling with that. That relationship ended. And so again, feeling all those feelings and using to cover that up and to really struggling with my identity. So I started hanging out with this person, with this guy. He, was cool. He was cool smoking meth too, and he liked opioids too. And so we had that in common, right? So you start hanging out with him a little bit more, partying with him a little bit more. And he was going through a breakup. I was going through a breakup. And so why are we so sad? And we ended up hooking up. Um, I later on was coming off of everything and anything that day, like a month later, and realized my period hadn't came, and uh, hit up my best friend. She was in recovery from alcohol, and she was doing amazing. And so I hit her up and said, "Hey, I think I'm pregnant. Like, let's go get a test. This that." So we go get tests and positive. Take another test, positive, and my whole life in that moment just changed. And stayed at her house for the next 2 3 weeks. The day that I found out I was pregnant, I was actually trying to leave Grand Forks. I was going to go down to California. I bought a bus ticket. I put my notice in at my job and saved a bit of money. And I was going to go down to California and just kind of be a hippie and I don't know, live a life. There really was no plan. It was just that um, the job that I worked at they had part of the franchise down in California. So I was guaranteed work. Um, and maybe it was me trying to get away from the drugs. I'm not sure, but I know I wanted to get out of Grand Forks. Um, and so I got pregnant and obviously didn't take the bus that day and really had to start thinking about what I wanted to do. So initially, first thing that came into mind is I wasn't fit to raise a kid. So I was thinking about doing an abortion. So I hustled some guy out of money. And I'm not justifying it. He was someone else I had hooked up with, and uh, he he was rich, and it didn't matter. It does matter. I'm not gonna. Anyways, I did something bad. I made a mistake. I hustled him out of money, told him the baby was his, and he gave me the money to get rid of it. I did what I had to do, and anybody who's been in the trenches and the depths of addiction, I mean, it is what it is. You do what you do. I definitely got my karma for it later on in life. And so I had this $500 to go get the abortion. And to do that, you have to get your pregnancy verified. So this 2 3 weeks, I was completely cold turkey abstaining from usage between the withdrawals, the shivering, the shaking, the hot, the cold sweats, the throwing out, the shitting yourself. Like it was just me dying in my friend's apartment for 2 3 weeks. I really wish I would have gone to a treatment center. I really wish I would have done it differently. It's really unsafe to do it that way, but it was what had to be done for me, and I didn't have any other support or help. And so, with my friend Sam to take care of me in that way, I made it through. And so, finally, I get to my verification appointment. I think they made me wait till you're a certain amount of weeks, and I take they go to listen to the heartbeat. They couldn't hear the heartbeat. So they're like, oh, we better do an ultrasound. So they do an ultrasound, and I see this beautiful alien head up on the screen. And I was like, oh my goodness. And just something in me, there was a switch. It just flipped. I just decided that I had to be different. I had to be better than the life that I had. And so I took that money, and I put it down on a little apartment. And I don't know how this happened, but I did lose my car at some point. And so I was legit no car, no house, no nothing. So I took that money and I put it down on a little apartment, called my job back and said, hey, I'm not, going to California anymore. Can I, start work back up? And they did. They were a big part of my support as well. I just ended up building up my capital. And that's something that we emphasize here at Face It Together, is building up your recovery capital. I didn't realize that was what I was doing at the time. So I got a home. I moved into that home with a blanket and a duffel bag of clothes and a storage tote. Started, saving up money, buying the things that I needed, building that home, making it a home. Got my license back, got a car again, just building the things that I needed to be able to be a successful parent for my daughter. I got promoted later on at the job I was at, and moved down to Fargo to kind of distance myself from some of those people. You know, you still got people calling you, still got people texting you, asking you, "Hey, where's the goods? Can you get this? Can you get that?" And through my pregnancy, I, didn't use. I was, yeah, since the day I found out I was pregnant, I didn't look back at needle usage. I didn't look back to do meth. I didn't look back to do opioids. None of that. And came up. I had my daughter. Um, we moved out to Fargo probably by the time she was 1, and then 1 or 2. Moved out to Fargo. Moved down to Sioux Falls for a different relationship. And here at Sioux Falls, I was still working with the same restaurant franchise, and uh, I something happened that this kind of was a bad day, so I started looking for different jobs, and I saw the app, saw the what's the word I'm looking for? The advertisement for this job, and it was, have you ever been in trouble? Have you ever struggled with drug usage? Have you ever been to prison? Have you ever done anything like that? And it's like, man, this can't be real. And so I applied, and I applied to come work at Face It Together. And I got the job, and I've really been prospering in it. It's helped me realize a lot more about myself as well. Something I share with people is, it's easy, in my opinion, it's easy to stop the drugs. It's easy to get off of them, but how do you stay off of them? And I like to refer to recovery as a relationship. You can get the girl, you can get the guy, you can be in the relationship, but how do you keep the relationship? And so for me, keeping my relationship with recovery is important. Recovery is what you want it to be. So many people emphasize on your days, on your time, how long you can abstain for, things of that nature. So recovery for me is, I don't ever want to go back to needle usage. I don't ever want to go back to using opioids or using amphetamines. I want to continue to be the well person that I am. Recovery for me is, I'm able to go out and have a drink with some friends. I'm able to go out and, visit or have, pair good wine with a good meal, things of that nature. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that part of my recovery, to where I am confident enough in myself and in my capabilities. A lot of that was realizing, my identity, being okay with who I am. Am I right that I'm lesbian? It's okay that I'm Black. This last year, I've done so much, redefinition. I actually, my ex-partner convinced me to do a ancestry DNA test, and I found my biological father, and I found this whole amazing group of family out in Portland, Oregon, that has nothing but love and acceptance. I was actually able to go to our family reunion in New Orleans this last summer, so I've just had so much love and so much support. It's absolutely amazing. My daughter is 10 now, and she isn't needing me as much. I'm not as cool as I used to be, I suppose. So that's also, helped me to understand that I need to work more on myself. What are my passions? What are my things that I enjoy? Because when you have, for lack of a better term, when you have distractions such as kids, work, upkeep in the home, and you're doing it by yourself, it's easy to forget your self-care. It's easy to forget the things that may be better for you. So I began working out more. I began writing again. I began doing journaling, began doing, those things again, to keep the recovery, to keep yourself from thinking, maybe just one more time. So that's kind of where I'm at, man. That's where I'm at.
Well, congratulations on your recovery. We got about 5 minutes left, so, tell us about anything that you're got coming up that people need to know about. Give out your contact info and give us some final thoughts in the next 5 minutes.
For sure. Well, I like I said, I work here at Face It Together. We specialize in peer support, so being able to connect people with people who have had that lived experience of addiction. So whether you're struggling to use and you're not abstaining, or you're in recovery looking for a little extra support, please feel free to reach out. We specialize in virtual calls. We also do in-person visits for Colorado Springs area and the Sioux Falls area here out of South Dakota. So please feel free to reach out. It's going to be faceittogether.org, or excuse me, wefaceittogether.org. We have a couple different fundraisers that are coming up that'll be pretty exciting. We have a Face It in the Fire. So we're going to be having If you look on our website, we have different, or excuse me, on our Facebook, we have different content to share some of that, some of what's going on there. But it's essentially kind of like a chef off. It'll be really interesting to see these chefs chef it up and do different tastings. So I think it's buying tables and things of that nature. And we also have a March in the Light coming up here. March in the Light, we start in the early morning sunrise and we march into the light as the sun comes up. It's a recovery walk that we do out of South Dakota, or excuse me, out of Sioux Falls and out of Colorado Springs area. Anybody is welcome to join. We do a nice big breakfast to start the day off, and then we do a nice walk into the sun. So just representing the recovery that everybody's been through and, coming out of it together. So,
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we faceittogether.org. If you know of anybody who needs Shannon services or needs addiction recovery services, please follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Jump on your favorite podcast app, give us a follow, a review. Curtis Jackson, 1978 at att.net is the place to send any guest suggestions or feedback for the show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. And Shannon, once again, congratulations on your recovery and thank you for sharing your story.
Yes, thank you for having me, Curtis. Appreciate you.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.